Alrighty, let's talk about metabolizing your feelings and your emotions. You're like, what's that mean? All right, so let's say you've started to accept something. You're like, okay, the relationship with my mom sucks. This relationship I thought was good with this guy is done, whatever the case may be. And you're like, okay, it's done. But then you're left with some of these lingering feelings, these feelings of emptiness, abandon, different things like that. So there's a few things we're going to talk about here, and it is going to require paper and pen. Do not do this in your head. Don't lazy it out for me. There is a reason, neurologically it is proven, scientifically it is proven, pen to paper is effective, and it is also healthy. That's why the 5 journals are important. Make sure you check out my 5 journal series here on YouTube. And the beautiful thing is, you know, this is good to do in your either your data dump, that's at nighttime, but like your negative journal, this will be very helpful for you to help process in it. And of course, once you fill that negative and the data dump journal up fully, you're going to burn that. The other journals you keep, but those other 2 you're going to burn. And that burns on the new moon and the full moon. So that's how that goes. But to fully metabolize your feelings, right? So now you've gone ahead and you've done all of these things and you've accepted stuff, but you still feel sad. You still feel all these things. Well, you obsessing on the feelings doesn't help you process them, right? I feel sad. First of all, what the hell does that even mean? Sad doesn't mean anything other than it's being a describer word like short or tall. But short means what to different people. So what does the sadness feel like to you? An example of that might be like, I feel like I am just like under an extremely heavy weight blanket. I feel like I'm going to cry at any given moment. I feel like it's hard for me to catch a breath. I need you to be descriptive on paper, on your paper. Okay. So, okay, this is where I am, right? Now, I want you to feel it in your body. If you feel like, you know, you got that pit in your stomach, that pit in your throat, feel like you got that headache, you gotta feel it. So I want you to sit there on paper and feel it. Okay, feel it and describe it. So let's say you have, your heartaches, right? You have a heartache because of a relationship. Okay. And you say, okay, I feel like my heart's breaking. Well, that's still not enough. I feel like my heart's breaking is still not enough. What does that feel like? It just feels like you can't catch a breath. It feels like you're insecure about everything. You're out of your control here. Well, after you start, and it's got to be detailed. So it could be 65 pages for one emotion. See, you're going to have to be committed to do this work, and you're going to have to do it frequently. I don't want to hear you don't want to do it, because if you don't want to do it, then don't tell me you want to process it. That's just the facts. Don't say you want to feel better, and then you only want to feel better on your terms, or you want to feel better when you choose to do certain. No, it's not how this works. That is not how this works. It's going to be you having to show up for yourself. You're going to have to be there and do the uncomfortable work. This means you have to feel it. Now, as you're writing this down, okay, I feel brokenhearted. Cool. Now you've described exactly what that means. Now you're going to say, okay, what is it at that time, even though you've gotten to that acceptance or you're still working on getting to the acceptance, you have to be honest with yourself. Here's the other key. Are you going to be honest with yourself? I thought, I wanted. Thoughts and wanted is also living in ego too. Expectation, ego could be abandon, could be attachment, could be codependency, these things. And I feel like I need to do a podcast on this. So I may even like piggyback on this with like a podcast. Not sure, because I feel like I could go a lot deeper than just 10 minutes. Because there's a lot that comes with it. Right. And so, but this is good to get you started, because you're not just going to do this in 10 minutes. You're going to do this over periods of years, and you're going to have to do this pretty frequently. So this is going to be tools that you're going to have in your toolbox that you can use forever and ever and never. And you will need to pull them out frequently. Right. So anyway, back to what I was saying. So now you write down, okay, this is, I wanted it to be different, but it isn't, and blah, 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 blah. And this is how it makes me feel. Here's the secret part of the process. So now we've identified it. You've put it down on pen to pad, because we know neuroscience says, hey, this absolutely works, right? Because it gets you out, gets you some clarity. In your head, it seems bigger. It's like, oh my God, it's all encompassed in your head, versus putting it down on paper to pen. It gives you a little bit of distance from it so you can kind of see it. And yeah, you're in it, and yeah, it still hurts, but you can see it. It doesn't look quite as scary and big and right? And so what I want you to do is, at that point, I want you to say, okay, what lessons have I learned from this? And no, the lessons are not going to be, I learned not to trust people. I learned I can't trust anybody. I learned everybody's stupid. Like that's not a lesson. That's a reaction. That's an emotional response. Now, an example of those lessons would be, I wanted it to be different. So what lesson did I learn? Okay, well, just because I want something different doesn't mean it's going to happen that way. And going forward, see, now we're going to switch it from that negative and all that feeling stuff as you're processing to give it a sort of a positive spin. Now you're going to say, okay, going forward, when I start to, this is just an example, going forward, when I start to see that just because I want it to be a certain way, I've communicated it, that it doesn't seem to be going in that direction, it's a good time for me to get out of that situation. I don't care that you want it. You've learned a lesson. Now, the problem comes when you go into insanity. And definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity. So if you're like, okay, well, the last time I wanted this to happen, it didn't work. But this time, because now remember, you've learned you can't fall in love with an idea of what you want it to be. We all have them. I mean, it's a human thing. Oh, I'd love for it to be this way. I'd want this to happen. I would love, right, great, fine. But the reality is you got to get to the acceptance that just because you want it to be a certain way and just because you can fantasize it and you desire it based of either just because you want it because, hey, you want something, or you want it because you feel like you need that security because you're still dealing with attachment. Well, obviously you've learned the lesson that like, if I'm attaching myself to an outcome, if I'm attaching myself to being a mom, if I'm attaching myself to being a wife or a doctor or a teacher, if I'm attaching myself to something, it creates this weird tether. So you have to ask yourself, what lessons have you learned? You get so focused on your feelings, which aren't facts. They're just there. And that's why you're processing them. They're not there. They don't have to live that way forever. Think about one thing. Like, here's an example. Think about one thing that you were just like in the moment of. Let's say it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Small, big, I don't care. And you were just, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Like, you're just like, holy cow. And then you notice now look, fast forward ahead and you're like, well, I'm still annoyed by it, but I'm like, oh, it's sad, but I've moved on. Like, you know what I mean? Like your feelings aren't facts. They're fluid, right? And so you can control a lot of that. And I know it's hard when you're in it. Feels like that is going to be forever. You know how we all catastrophize things. Always. This is always going to be. This is never going to be. We always catastrophize. But in order to process your feelings, you have to distance from them a little bit. You still have to feel them. You got to feel it to heal it. You got to walk through the fire. You can't go around it. Valid. But don't live there as though your feelings are facts. They are feelings. They are not facts. And so when you're focusing everything on how, well, I don't want to feel this way again. Okay, I got it. But then what lesson have you learned, and not in a defensive way? Well, I'm going to give you an example. So you're like, well, what does that mean? It could be your expectation. Well, I kind of saw this being the way that I wanted it to be, and I really like this person. So I really want to fit this person into how I want them to be. Babe, that's you. That's your expectation. You got to curb your expectations. I gave so much. Again, boundaries. Do you see how things are going to come back to expectations? They're going to come back to boundaries. They're going to come back to self-love. Everything in which you are like stressed about, freaked out about, whether it be or trauma, I guess you can throw that in there too. It's going to come back to just a few things. So remember, you're dealing with the symptom. The symptom is the feeling. That's the symptom of what the deeper rooted issue is. That's the symptom. So when you can extract the lesson, feel the feeling without fighting it and going, I just want it to stop. I just want it to go away. I want the sadness to go away. Well, you're not going to will it away. You don't will things away. Just because you want it to go away doesn't mean it will. And it's not fast. And here's the caveat, and I'm going to go back to it again. You have to do the work. You have to feel uncomfortable. You can book a session with your girl. You can book a session with somebody, but you can't do it always on your own. Can't do it on your own because you're only going to carry yourself, especially in the beginning, you can't do it on your own because you're only going to carry yourself as far as the comfort's going to allow you to go. Because until you're ready to face the stuff, be clear and own it, right? This isn't about Bobby hurting your feelings and cheating on you. That's not really what it is, because you're going to keep blaming Bobby. Bobby's going to keep having control over you. And now it's your accountability for your healing. So that is just a blurb on how you can start to process your feelings and what that looks like.